I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm speaking about this video, and this video comes from Within Reason channel, and this guy, uh, the one on the left of your screen here, the darker one of the two, is called Alex O'Connor, and it's his channel. And he speaks about lots of esoteric stuff and has great interviews and asks great questions. Now, this particular video is, as it states upon the top there, the most famous gospel not in the Bible. What is the Gospel of Thomas? So they're speaking about the Gospel of Thomas, and it's an excellent inquiry into what the 114 sayings of Jesus in the book of Thomas really mean, or they hypothesize, because it's very difficult to know. But the piece I'm picking out is the bit which will follow, which has a great deal to do, I think, what is happening today. Now, when we listen to all different sorts of people speaking about as to why the world is being manipulated in a certain way, one of the first ports of call we need to go to is the British guy called David Icke. David Icke has been writing about this esoteric, supernatural, paranormal, interdimensional stuff for 30 years. And he's wrote over 20 books on these subjects, and is a prolific content provider. You won't find him on YouTube because he's banned, and he's been banned from speaking throughout the whole of Europe. And the only place he's managing to have some venues is here in Britain. And he can't actually say these things on any of the popular platforms, like he's banned from Twitter or X and Facebook and all the rest of it, YouTube. And he's got his own channel on the internet, davidicke.com or iconic.com, maybe two channels. Now then, over and above him, there's very few people speaking about the depth of what is actually going on in the world. In relation to interdimensional beings and the connection with the you-know-whos. The you-know-whos have been apparently manipulating the world for thousands of years. And so when we go back to the writings of the Old Testament, well, we can see that these so-called chosen people chose themselves to be the chosen people, and then they supplanted God as the authority which chose them. How convenient, a God choosing you out of all the peoples on the planet. So, bearing that in mind, people, that they consider themselves to be the chosen people, and they now actually own the world, well, you may now be able to see what I am seeing, what I am putting together in this video. What's happening in recent times is that there is a war on the male and the female, a war on the sexes. They are trying to break down any notion of a division between the sexes. Now, that in itself sounds absolutely ludicrous to any rational thinking person. But when you start looking into the deep esoteric and relations and connotations with the you-know-whos, with the Old Testament, then things start to get clearer. And this book, the Book of Thomas, brings a great deal of focus to this theme, that there shouldn't be any division between a man and woman. There shouldn't actually be men and women. They should be androgynins. We should be an androgynous race, like we were originally, according to Plato. Now, okay, maybe be sounding pretty complex and confusing here. So I will let you listen to this discussion, and then I will say a few words in between.
I'm glad you brought up saying number 22. So again, this is when you make the two one, when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like the below, when you make the male and the female into a single one. So this theme of a single one or a solitary one or one, this is going back to what I was saying about the bifurcated anthropology, where we have our material self and then we have our true heavenly primordial light self. And the goal of salvation is to reintegrate, to unify those two selves. So saved people are the solitary ones. And it's interesting that term solitary or one that's used so many times in the Gospel of Thomas, it's the word monachos, where we get the word monk, which, again, kind of echoing the ascetic idea. So the whole goal is to reunify or reintegrate, to become one, because right now we're bifurcated. We have our earthly self, but we have a true self that we need to realize is out there. And when we make that realization, we become one. We reunify.
So that's the whole thing about spiritually waking up, isn't it? We realize that we are spirit fundamentally, having a human experience. And so then when we realize that relationship, and we can actually then feel and know that we are spirit, as well as the experience of a human form, then we are effectively enlightened as to what we really are. And so that's one facet of it, the unification, because we unify with God. And the whole premise of Jewish Kabbalah is about unity with God. And so ultimately, the powers that be on this earth have this grand idea of being unified with God, and it may just be that they also have that idea in mind for us. Now, if they want us all to be unified, one of the first things they're going to do is to destroy the notion of our separateness, the male and the female, and bring that into one. And so let us see what comes out of this now.
By ourselves. So we see this is channeling another concept we find in Plato's Symposium. So in Plato's Symposium, there's this kind of bizarre myth that's described about how the sexes have come into being, male and female. And according to Plato's Symposium, the primordial human was this spherical being with 4 arms and 4 legs and a cylindrical neck and 2 faces. That was the primordial androgynous human. It also had 2 sets of genitals, as an aside. So you had this androgynous, multi-limbed being that the gods become concerned about. This being is getting too powerful. Let's bifurcate it. Cut it down the middle. 2 heads, 2 arms, 2 legs. Let's separate the genitals as well. And so this is the understanding of male and female. What was this bifurcation of the primordial androgyne? And then the Plato Symposium uses this as an explanation for like heterosexual attraction, where the male and the female feel this desire to reintegrate, but they can't because they've been separated. So we see this in the Gospel of Thomas. The Plato Symposium is running through some of these more confusing passages.
It's significant to notice, people, that the only time we really, really do feel unified with one another is via love, isn't it? And the whole premise of Jesus's sayings is that we should love our neighbor and our enemy as we do ourselves, which the vast majority of us find a complete impossibility. But we can love our children, we can love some people close to us, and we can love our partners. And so when we do that, then we do enter into the unity of love, and we feel this oneness. We feel so connected and a part of the other person. So there's truth in that, isn't there? And so that's what Plato was speaking about. So let's see what else comes out of this.
Where the true, our primordial selves are androgynous. They're neither male nor female, and we're trying to reintegrate that. So when saying number 22 says, when you make the male and the female into a single one, when you reunite into that spherical, perfect primordial being, make it into a single one, then you will enter the kingdom. So that is the goal of salvation in at least in saying number 22. But we see this throughout. Becoming a single one, becoming a solitary one, is pointing at this androgynous self. And this interpretation is carried through into interpretations of the Book of Genesis, where the Book of Genesis.
Well, I think that's where this scholar has got that wrong, because when he's saying that we should become one, we should become single. No, it isn't that we should become one and single. It's that we become one and whole with the whole of humanity, the whole of cosmos, and the whole of God. That's the way I interpret it, and I would think many other people, and I've listened to lots of other scholars and spiritual people and Buddhists and all sorts of people, and they say the same thing, that it is a oneness in the entirety. So Jesus isn't inferring that you become one and insular and isolated in your androgynous nature. No, you become one with all males, with all females, with all living creatures, with all cosmic bodies. So look, you see, people, this is the thing. This guy is a scholar, and even he misses the mark so greatly on the most simple of things like that, which many other people have grasped. And this is the great difficulty of trying to find any notion of truth, because there simply isn't any. There is just a gazillion perspectives.
Says that we're made in the image of God, male and female. We were created. It is saying male and female in one being. So the understanding that the original human was androgynous, and that the separation of the sexes, creating Eve by taking the rib of Adam out of him, was actually a bad thing for some Christians. The Gospel of Thomas, or not the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, which is in the same codex as the Gospel of Thomas, explicitly says that this was a bad thing. So I have the quote here from the Gospel of Philip. When Eve was still in Adam, death did not exist. When she was separated from him, death came into being. If he enters again and attains his former self, death will be no more. So
now then, when you look at that, you see that then sheds light on the demiurge of the Old Testament, because it was Yahweh who created Eve out of Adam. Yahweh took Eve out of Adam, and that was a bad thing, that was a negative thing, and that's when all of our problems started. It wasn't within the original sin of eating from the forbidden tree. You see, people, how deep this shit is. Let's have a look.
The separation of the sexes, at least for the Gospel of Philip, is considered to be part of the fall of humanity. And there's this goal to reintegrate into this androgynous being. So I think we see a similar theme in the Gospel of Thomas, even though it's not explicitly said. At least in saying number 22. We can now talk about saying number 114 if you want.
You have.
So he's just said there then that the separation of taking Eve away from Adam and creating a separate unity was the beginning of the fall. And what else happened? Well, the eating of the fruit. That's the only other thing, wasn't it? So it had already happened. So the eating of the fruit wasn't the original sin, which was blamed on Eve. The original sin was perpetrated by Yahweh. So Yahweh is the demiurge. Yahweh is the bad guy, people.
You have preempted me. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
but again,
it's like,
this is not being invented out of whole cloth. This is coming from Plato, but it's also coming from the New Testament. What the Apostle Paul says in Galatians, there'll no longer be male or female. So you can imagine someone very well versed in Plato's Symposium reading the book of Galatians when Paul says there will no longer be male and female, and be like, oh, and we were made male and female, and bringing that all together. So scriptural exegesis is happening in these texts. It's not just being created divorced from Christian tradition.
Yeah, I mean that's brilliant. By the way, we'll be doing something on the Gospel of Philip. I'm not quite sure who with and quite when yet, but I'm really excited to dig into the Gospel of Philip. It's not something that I've sat down and read, so that is a very instructive quote and example, and I'm grateful to you for bringing it to my attention. But as you say, there is probably the most famous quotation from the Gospel of Thomas is the very last one, number 114, which every single time I introduce the Gospel of Thomas to people that I know who maybe haven't heard of it, don't know anything about the apocryphal Gospels, probably the first thing that I point out to them to indicate just how weird and wacky these non-canonical Gospels are is this quote, saying number 114, at least the translation I have. Mary should leave us, Simon Peter said, because women are not worthy of life. Okay, side note, this is where you might expect Jesus to say something like, don't be so silly, Simon Peter, women are worthy of life, and she can enter the kingdom of God. This wonderful, progressive, inclusive Jesus. No, this is what Jesus says. Now I will draw her to me to make her male, Jesus said, to make her a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven. And there it ends. The gospel according to Thomas. That's it.
Now, when we look at what's going on in the world with the promotion of sex changes with children, we might start to see a little bit of rationale behind what's going on. Because if these people, these believers in these scriptures, have an intention for the world which is so powerful in the name of God, then they think they are doing God's work. And so by allowing children to mutilate themselves and to destroy whatever sexuality they had, then they are becoming effectively androgynous. They aren't both sexes, they are neither. And you see, the thing is with this androgynous word, which is said to mean both sexes, we often hear it spoken about to mean non-sexual, no sexes. A non-sexed being, and so whilst you're here, I'm just going to go on to dictionary, and androgynous definition: partly male and partly female in appearance, of indeterminate sex. Indeterminate sex. Partly male and partly female in appearance, of indeterminate sex. So there is no sex there. There's no determination. You cannot determine. It's indeterminate what sex they are. But they are partly male and partly female. And so let's have a look now what this means in psychology. In psychology, androgyny is a term that describes people who have strong personality traits associated with both sexes. This can include traits like assertiveness and nurturing behavior, toughness and gentleness. Okay, so you've got the polarities amalgamating together. But that isn't what is being spoken about here. And so let us join again. Now then, what's gone on here? I don't know what's gone on here now. Back to tab. This is the first time I've done this. Okay, how do I get back to tab? Not that way. I don't know. Looks like I've lost it now. No, it's gone. Fuck. Oh, for